Welcome to Digitally Creative. I'm your host, Vincent Ferrari, and joining me this week is someone who I've probably mentioned about 25 times in the 12 episodes or 13 episodes as it is today of this podcast. So I figured it was probably time to actually have him on. So I have the one and only Jeff Stein, aka A Weird Guy. What's going on, Jeff? How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Vincent?
I am rocking and rolling, man. Having a great day. Been super productive. And I get to come home and I get to chat with my buddy Jeff for a little while. So it's all in all a good day.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, let's see. Last time we spoke, you were on Because We Make, and you had just finished the Maker's Magic Toolbox. And I do believe that we righted a wrong, so to speak, by you actually won the Unwrap a Project challenge. I do believe you won, correct? That was the winning project, was the Maker's Magic Toolbox.
Yep. I won the second one. There weren't any Bernies in that contest, so I was able to pull that one in.
That's been the running joke for those of you that need a little bit of recap or who are new to the podcast. Because We Make this podcast before it was Digitally Creative, Because we had a challenge called the Enlighten Us Challenge, and Jeff produced an absolute killer chain chomp lamp. It was just a banger of a project. And freaking Bernie Solo comes in and he does something completely batshit with his CNC and a saw and makes a lamp. And it was just like, oh man, there's just no way. Like, he has to win. This is terrible. He has to win.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, I made a cool project, but I mean, he attached a circular saw to his CNC and cut dados with it. So, I mean,
something that I know you as a person are probably very much in favor of, but would not recommend to anybody else, of course. But something that you were probably watching it going, yeah, I like that.
it's something that I would do, but probably wouldn't recommend to do.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the case for most of the stuff that you do, right? Because one of the things that you've become known for, you and I got our Shape Okos at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And you have just, I'm not even gonna lie, like, I am jealous of how well you have taken to it and how quickly you've already started pushing it to its limits. In fact, just a couple of days ago, I won't go too far into it, but you posted in your stories, yep, another hole. And I was just laughing. I'm like, damn it, he did it again, But
Yep.
you've really just done some wild stuff with your Shape Oko since you got it.
Yeah, I was actually mounting the workpiece on the table below the Shape Oko because I was cutting a 2.5 inch tall piece of inlay and I needed the clearance. So new hole, and then it is what it is. It's only spoil board and the MDF that makes up the actual piece of the Shape Oko base, but I mean, it's only MDF, really. I mean, it's not priceless.
I feel like early on into our Shape Oko journeys, you introduced me to Dennis Van Hoof. And ever since then, I feel like a spark got lit with you and like what you could do with this machine. And all of a sudden it went from this would be cool to have to I could do some cool things with it to this guy is bonkers and I want to be equally bonkers someday. Like, you aspire to be that level of bonkers.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have the interest in the larger scale projects that he does, where he's doing, 3-sided carves on something that's 24 inches long or tall, and I'm more into the smaller detail work than the larger stuff, and
That makes sense.
it makes more sense with the Shape Oko. I don't have a whole lot of room. I would have to take out the entire base to sink anything larger in there, which is what Dennis did for his stuff. But I'm happier doing insanity on a smaller scale.
It's fun watching you, because the Shape Oko has this reputation of being this more of like a blunt instrument, even though it can be very precise. And then I watch you doing like the Groot bust, and it's like the detail level with a 1/32 end mill, just like tiny little bits, just taking off detail, detail, detail. And it's like, yeah, this machine's more than capable of doing that stuff. It's just nobody does that stuff with it, you know?
Right.
Do you find that to be like your experience with the machine in general, that it's capable of doing more than it's given credit for, and that's why you push the limits, because you just kind of have this sense of what it's actually capable of?
Well, it does have specific limits,
Mhm.
but its limits don't seem to be on the precision end of the scale. The limits are much leaning towards the power side of the scale, where it's driven by quarter-inch belts.
Mhm.
There's no screw drive here, ball screw drive, none of that. There's
Right.
quarter-inch belts, and it's powered with a, what is it, a Makita trim router? What is it, a
Yeah, it's a
one
Makita
and a
router.
quarter?
Even the
What is that?
Yeah, even the Carbide Create
One
one is
horse,
just a
one and a
yep,
quarter,
yep,
something little
yep,
like that.
yep,
So I
yep.
mean, the limitations are you can't just go blasting through a 3/4 inch piece of ply with one pass, because it just hasn't got the balls for that. It hasn't got the
Right.
power, and it hasn't got the, stability for it. So what it does have is the ability to delicately precision cut anything you would like it to do. So that's really what I like to do with it. It's what it excels at.
And
Other
you've
than being out of the box, dead simple for, basic CNC use, obviously, your
oh,
signs and your
100%.
stuff.
Yeah, I what you've done really well is you've kind of, well, for example, the most recent video you did, your SVG to toolpath video, which I like to say that I had a small part in the production of that video. At least I was the guinea pig for the video, but it was amazing to see what you could do with professional software and that machine, because there are things that I've bumped into over the years with it where I'm like, oh, it would be so nice if it could do this. And then, like flattening. Like flattening is
Mhm.
just so much easier with Fusion 360 than it'll ever be with Carbide Create. Like it just is. There's some basic functionality that I feel like if they just added into Carbide Create, it would be perfect software. And they've made great strides with it. But man, when you showed me all the stuff in Fusion, I was just like, wow, a couple of clicks and I'm done.
Well,
Like it's remarkable.
Fusion is a completely different beast,
Hmm.
because it is not at its heart a CNC toolpath software. It's a 3D modeling and tooling software, and it's got more attachments than an entire infantry of Swiss Army guys. So it does everything in any way, but it's primarily a 3D software. It thinks in 3D, it looks in 3D,
Hmm.
and it's a very visual 3D interface. Whereas uh, your Vectric and your Carbide and your easels are basically 2D software with some 2.5 and occasionally 3D features kind of
Yep.
tacked on as an afterthought, but
That's
it's
exactly it.
primarily a 2D software. But Fusion, it's a very visual way to work, because you can just model the project you want. I mean, if you've got a cutting board and you model the cutting board in 3 dimensionals, you draw the dimensions of it, you extrude it out, you've got the cutting board, and then you can say, well, I want to put some a V carve down one side with the customer's name on it. You can actually put that. Well, V carve's not really a good thing for Fusion. That's a bad example, uh, but I mean, if you were
Example
just wanted to,
understood though.
if you just wanted to make some pockets that you're gonna either inlay or fill with some resin, that you can just literally put the text on the sketch and put it right into the picture, so you can see exactly what you're going to get, and then you can use that to visually build the tool paths. And while Fusion actually does have a simulate button, which will literally watch the tool run around the path, I don't use it very often because once it generates the tool path, you can actually see the lines wrapping around the shape. So you can
Uh-huh.
see where it's going to go and where it's not going to go. The only time you really need to run simulate is if you're curious as to where it's going to go first, or what order it's going to go, and whether it's going to run into anything else is something good to watch it actually. But I mean, I don't even use that very often because it's such a visual. You can see where the tool path's going to be on the overview,
Yeah.
and you can see what material it's going to leave behind, which is even cooler.
That was something that caught that was those were two, that was something that actually caught me when you were showing me how to do the SVGs, the tool paths. The way it shows you what material is going to be left behind and what you're going to be dealing with, and it's just such a more it's such a more visual way to look at your project rather than starting with, let's say, a design and cut this out of a piece of stock, and it just shows you what the design is going to look like cut out of the piece of stock. This actually shows you the stock as well, like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is going to be left behind, we're not going to touch this. It makes you a more competent designer too, because you're now accounting for these things that otherwise you end up crashing an end mill into. Not that I've done that, but you end up crashing an end mill into something because you forget about, oh yeah, that's right, there's stock on the other side of that design.
Well, I think everybody's crashed an end mill into something at some point in their life. um,
If you haven't crashed it, it's because you're not using it. It's like when I was talking to Lindsay and we were talking about jeweler saw blades. And I said, who has never broken a jeweler saw blade? A person who's never used a jeweler saw. Like, you break
yeah,
blades constantly. That's why they sell them by the gross. You don't buy 144 of something that's not consumable.
right.
So,
I'm happy to say that I've never broken any real end mills. And by real end mills, I mean real sized end mills. I don't really count those 1/32 inch end mills because
toothpicks.
I've broken, I believe, about 20 of those. And I've got my third 10 pack sitting here, but I'm happy to say that I haven't broken one of them in months. So I think I've finally nailed the
I
proper
broke
speed for
one.
that.
I've broken
Yeah.
one in 3 years. It was the 1/8. I broke the
Okay.
1/8. I broke a 1/8. And again, it's because it's these skinny bits. And all I did, like, I just wasn't paying close enough attention. And I turned it on. Machine spins up. It's fine. It's spinning at the right speed. I got that much right. It was spinning at 18,000. And all of a sudden, I'm like, uh oh, I forgot some. And I just forgot to change, like, it was the amount of depth per pass, I think it was. And the thing just went straight into a piece of walnut. And I hear clink. And I'm like, yep, that's the end
Oops.
of that one. Took it up. There's like, I don't even know where the rest of that end mill is. I kept it because it was so funny to me. Like, if you didn't know the size of that end mill, you'd have no idea that the piece was off it. But I heard it clink in the wood, and I'm like, yeah, I broke that one. So I
Oops.
think that's part of the territory, though.
It's learning curve, and
Mm-hmm.
they're considered consumables, so it's
Sure.
okay. Um, I'm just I tend to start my paths very conservative and
Mm.
then ramp them up as I feel more comfortable because I've messed things up. I've forgotten to set multiple depths, at which point, yeah, it wants to jump in and do
Oh
a
yeah.
half an inch in one pass. But I've gotten to the point over the years where I start my paths at like half speed, and
Mm-hmm.
then once I see that the depths and the step overs are actually what I wanted them to be and everything's running smoothly, then I'll ramp it back up. But
Mm-hmm.
until then, I've got my eyeballs on it and I've got my finger on the damned pause button because that's really the only reason I haven't broken things. And it's not because I don't screw things up.
Oh, sure.
It's because I've gotten cautious and I keep my finger on the pause button until I'm sure it's going to do what I thought I asked it to do.
Where
Thought.
did you where does your fusion knowledge come from? Because I know where mine came from, and I know how long it took me, and how many. So I took Vlad Mariano's Fusion 360 for 3D printing class on Skillshare. He's at desktopmakes.com. You can actually take his class now. You can take that same class directly from him. You don't have to go to Skillshare to take it. And I took Bob's class from I Like to Make Stuff, Fusion 360 for woodworkers, I think it's called, or Fusion 360 for
Yeah.
furniture or something, whatever
And
it's called. Whatever he
I've
calls
seen
that class. Yeah,
I've
I
seen
took.
both of those. I actually did a free trial on Skillshare because you said that that's the program that you need to look at,
Mhm.
and it kind of gave me a start, but I really didn't get a good feel for it from him. Yeah, it
Mhm.
just didn't really
It was a
click
different.
for me too well.
You were looking for different things than he was teaching out of it. I mean, it does
Right.
teach you the app, but it's not going to teach you the cam part, which is what you need to learn.
Well, I wasn't even looking for cam right off the bat. I was
Mhm.
just trying to get a feel for the software at all
Oh.
and the CAD side. I mean, and I've had some previous CAD experience with other software, so I mean,
Mhm.
I normally expect to pick things up pretty quickly because I've got lots of software experience since, people started writing software because I'm old and I've had computers since they made home computers.
Amen, brother.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
both got some gray in the old beard here. I understand completely.
Exactly. But yeah, he just didn't really click too well for me. But
Okay.
then I did buy the Bob's I Like to Make Stuff Fusion for Makers class. I got it on the Black Friday sale 2
Mhm.
years ago. And then I watched that. I think I made it, I don't know, maybe 2/3 of the way through. I think I made it through the modeling section, and then I got to the part where they explained how to do the setups and how to start doing a toolpath. And then I was too busy playing with Fusion to actually finish the rest of that course. I think I went back like a year later and actually forced myself to watch it just in case I missed some good information, but
Mhm.
I was just too darned busy playing with it, having fun, and I just ran with it from that point. That's all the education I've had with it. I mean, I've seen a couple of YouTube videos that were, Fusion related, but otherwise, I'm a I'm an F around and find out kind of guy, and
Good.
Fusion is absolutely dead simple in the fact that once you understand the basic incomprehensible concepts that make the software work,
Yeah.
which, for CAD is figuring out that the workflow involves making a sketch, putting your vectors on a sketch, coming out of the sketch, and then extruding those into 3D objects. That's the inscrutable detail that you will never just get
Sure.
automatically. You have to be taught that one because it doesn't intuitively make any damn sense. Once
Mhm.
you get it, it's great, but until then, you need to be taught that one. And for the cam side, it's the setup, and once somebody's explained how the setup works, and it just sort of generates what part you're going to cut, which side you're going to cut it from, which side is up, and which direction you want your, you know, zero origin to be pointed at. And what are you going to cut it out of? Are all things that are hidden in that setup button. Once you get those two things, everything else is really self explanatory because everything you hover over in Fusion gives you this not just an alt text, it pops up an entire pop-up window with a
Yep.
full explanation and
Yep.
graphics of exactly what every checkbox and text field is going to do for you
Yep.
vaguely. Very little do you have to actually go research to figure out what something does because you hover it and it'll tell you.
Fusion's come a long way over the last. I mean, I've been using it since 2017, and it's come a long way since I started using it. Like, it is. I know that there's been a lot of changes where people have looked at it and gone, "Oh, why are you changing this? Why are you changing?" And they have changed a lot. They've changed that interface drastically. But I think that the current iteration right now is probably where it's going to live for a while, because I think it's the most functional it's been since I started using it. And I imagine I can't be the only one, although I mostly hear complaints. I rarely hear praise, but I really do believe that as far as the UI and the way that it exposes features right now, I think they've kind of taken what was good about Fusion 360. And you know how you said it had the animated, when you hover over something, it does an animated explanation of stuff? That was Adobe. Adobe was doing that with Creative Cloud and Creative Suite. They started doing that with all, because their apps are the same way. They're super duper dense and they're not always intuitive. So when you hover over a tool now, you get those graphical display of it does this. This is what you have to do. And it's like I think they've really done a good job now of taking an interface that was powerful but clunky and kind of streamlining it a little bit in a good way, even though it hurt the people that were in routines.
Well, I don't know how much it's really changed. I'm not a super expert in interfaces, but I will say that wherever they stole it from, it's very advanced, competent programming with user usability in mind.
Hmm.
Um, I'm I don't know if I ever would have figured out half of what I do with Fusion if they wouldn't have just automatically popped up and told me what each one of the damned buttons does. So it'd be a lot more work to figure things out.
I love that we're watching. I love that. For those of you watching this episode, I love that Jeff has over his left shoulder. He has Rosie, his Shape Oko. Jeff and I named it's interesting. We kind of named them using the same mindset, just different robots. Mine is named Tweaky, and his is named Rosie. For those of you that don't know it, by the way, you'd be surprised, Jeff, how many people don't know who Tweaky is, and it really bugs me. So, nerds, we're a secret society. But I'm looking at it now, like just I'm marveling. That was one of the first full projects you did after you got it. And I know you didn't necessarily use the CNC for the whole thing, but I love that I could see Rosie in the background as we're talking about
Yeah.
Rosie. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, she wasn't digital in any way. She was just
Hmm.
manually cut and weld project. And
She's become a character in your videos now too, which is kind
she
of cool.
never really got finished, and I feel sort of bad about that. But she was originally gonna have arms, and uh, I started with the picture of Rosie in vacuum mode with the hose
Ah,
coming out of her chest.
uh-huh, uh-huh.
So that was the original plan. Was I've got a small corrugated plastic hose that would attach to her chest, and I was going to make it run down and make it look like she was doing the dust collection for me. But I got down to the part where making the arms was really hard,
Hmm.
and I got distracted by something else shiny that had a time limit on it. No, I ran into a project with a time limit.
Hmm.
There was the Mystery Maker collab,
Hmm.
and I got a box of parts from one person, and then I had to make something out of it to give to someone else, and that ended up being a boat that I gave to Austin from High Caliber.
Which is
Uh,
pretty wild in and of
but
itself.
I got the parts in the mail, and I wanted to have the project done and sent to its recipient in time for Christmas. So Rosie went on hold at the unfortunate time where she was at a very difficult spot where I wasn't sure how I was actually going to pull off the arms. And then between my resistance of ever going back to an unfinished project, and especially if that unfinished project is at a particularly difficult spot,
Hmm.
it's just I keep moving forward, and the poor girl's got no arms and no hose, but you
That's okay.
know,
She's still a
she's still
character.
got she's still got the place of honor over here on top of the CNC.
One thing I will say, my journey with resin 3D printing has just been an absolute horror show. And if it wasn't for you constantly churning out awesome stuff with your Mars, I swear I never would have got back into it again. Like it was just I every single time I tried, it was a disaster every time. And for the first time, I actually have a resin 3D printer that I like, that works reliably, and that I'm very, 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 very happy with. But watching you, that's another thing. So for those of you that don't follow along, Jeff isn't just a CNC guy. He's also a hell of a competent 3D printer user. I'm super impressed by how quickly you got your Mars running because, as everyone that listens to this podcast knows, I've had two and I never got either one of them working. So the fact that
Well,
you got yours working at the level it did, and I've seen prints from it, so I know it's good. But
I'd like to take some magic credit for being super intelligent and mastering this complicated technique, but
you
I'm
can
gonna
take
tell
credit for
you,
that. It's fine.
I took this thing out of the box and I watched the setup video, and it says run the loosen the two screws so the plate is floppy, and it says run it all the way down until it presses firmly into the glass top below it, at which point you know it's absolutely perfectly level, and it says tighten this screw down first and then tighten that screw. And I said, okay, I did that. And it says go up a little bit and put a piece of paper under it, and then go down until it says it's about the right, whatever you're supposed to feel with the paper. And then you push the zero it right here button. And then I poured resin in it, and I downloaded about 648 models from Thingiverse, and I printed them out. And three-fourths of them have actually been functional models and working. I've done very little practical work with it. I've only done, I don't know, 2 or 3 projects that were actually useful, but it's mostly tchotchkes and, crap.
I think that's what most. I hate to say it, as much as I love 3D printing and as much as I know it's useful for a lot of things. I think that's what most people are doing with their 3D printers. I hate to say it, but they go
Well,
on Thingiverse, they get a thing, and they download and they print it, and that's a day. I hate to say it, but
we've printed probably 15 different Mario characters at different scales and different colors. And I've got a teen that's into video games, and he wants to print anything he can find. It's like 2 days ago, we printed a couple of monsters from the original Doom game that
oh
we
wow,
that well, he was playing the I think it's the original. I don't know. It's out on Switch that he
yeah,
just
the
got
original.
he got
So
the first Doom on Switch for Christmas. So he wanted to play. So he wanted to look for this. So we went to Thingiverse and we typed in Doom, and we found a couple of monsters and printed the darn things out for him. And now he's got a couple of more monsters to add to his shelf. But
as
it is
someone
what it is.
as someone who's been in gaming a long time, I mean, we talked about the last time you were on. We spent a lot of time talking about how you got your start as a maker, and one of the things that you were into before you were even a maker was modding Xboxes. As someone who's into original Xboxes, as someone who's into game or in has a history with gaming, does it blow your mind that Doom is still so damn good today? Like I personally, Doom and Quake, I have played both of them in the last 3 months for a while. Like, and I'm not talking just pick it up and go, oh, this is fun, nostalgia. Okay, close it down. Like I have devoted some time to both. Does it blow your mind that those are still like as playable and as good as they were, and that people
Well,
finding them now are even finding them good?
they were genuinely coded well to start with. I mean, the physics were good and the gameplay was good. And as Nintendo has proved time and time again, the highest level of utmost graphics is not required to have
I
fun.
agree. I agree.
So you can go back to those old games and you can still play Quake, you can still play the original Tomb Raider. Uh, Doom is good. Under the Quake line, the one that I think I really liked was the one that really put your brain into 3 dimensionals. It was called Descent
Okay, let
because
me just
it had
I
a it
can't
had a
tell you.
It had a
how much
pitch and a
money I
roll.
spent. Yep. I spent so much money on different flight sticks trying to have the perfect experience to play Descent. Descent and then Descent 2 was good, but Descent 1, especially over a
Yeah.
modem when you're playing with your friends, oh my god, that game was amazing. Just
Oh,
having to think, like you said, thinking in 3 dimensions like that.
I was
Yeah,
playing it on a PC with a keyboard without a modem. But yeah,
wonderful
the
game.
3 dimensions of having to pitch forward and spin and rotate and yeah, that was fantastic. I love thinking in 3 dimensions. You can probably tell that with some of my work.
Even then he knew. There was another game, I'm trying to remember the name of it because it was spelt weird. That was a very good, if you're into Descent, there was another game. It was like a knockoff of Descent. I'll think of it at some point, but I'll probably put it in on the screen somewhere. But I'm trying to find it now as I'm talking to you, and I can't find it. But it was on Steam. It was just a fantastic game, and it was clearly a knockoff of Descent. Like, it played the same, the physics felt the same. It was just modernized, and it was kind of like this taste of what Descent could have been had it come out on modern hardware, and it was kind of wild actually. But yeah, Descent was, oof, man, I'm having I'm having all those good feels right now thinking about Descent. That's one that you can't really play on a modern machine. I'd have to get my hands on an older machine to play it on because I've tried it on this one, just doesn't play. Like, I have it, I still have it to this day. But that's, wow, I haven't
But
thought about that game in a
you know,
while.
maybe you and a lot of people think of games from that era as being super primitive graphically and really, really old. But I mean, I started with a Pong console.
So did I.
The console was it was just a you plug it into the back of the TV through the coax and
Mhm.
it plays Pong. That's all it does. And then we got another console right after that that did brick out. That's all it did was brick out. It was just the brick out machine. I don't know what the heck it was called, but you know, and then the Atari 2600 came out. We upgraded to that. But I mean, so we started our games back when lots of stuff was either text only or pre 2600 era. So
My very first game system, the very first game system that we had in my house was the 1977 Coleco Telstar. That was the very first game system that was in the Ferrari household. And to this day, I have fond memories of playing those. Honestly, they were just terrible. Most of the games were terrible, right? Oh, it's hockey. Oh, it's tennis. Oh, it's kind of not. But at as a kid, you're playing this. It's like, I'm controlling what's on the screen. Like, there's a disconnect almost that happens when you start moving stuff on a screen with a thing in your hand. And I think that's kind of what translates into the digital fabrication thing that makes it so amazing because, we lived through a time where video games were starting to become a thing and people were amazed that you could control what's on a TV with a device. And now we're controlling what's on a screen with a device to make a thing out of nowhere in the real world. It's kind of crazy, actually, that we're the same people doing all this stuff.
we've definitely lived through a very fun transition period
Hmm.
as computers have gone from I mean I had an Apple II Plus in the
Hmm.
early 80s and that was the most amazing 16K of RAM that I'd ever seen used at that point. And now I've got something that's, about 4,000 times powerful than that in my pocket
Hmm.
and plays much, much better games than the Olympics with stick figures hitting the left and right arrow keys as fast as I can.
Most of the games, Forsaken, by the way, that's the name of the game I was trying to remember the name of. The one that's like Descent, and it plays on modern hardware, and you probably really enjoy it. It's very, very, very good. Controls are identical. Um, most of the stuff that I feel like that we were into. I was talking about this with John from Gen X Grown Up too. it's amazing to me how well the stuff that we grew up with is aging so well, to the point where when you hand it to a kid today, they even enjoy it. And I don't know of a lot of stuff that's out now. I mean, there's stuff now that doesn't even hold my interest now. I can't think of anything that's out now. I love my Nintendo Switch. It's my favorite console. It's probably my favorite console that I've ever owned. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. And I totally am on board with Nintendo's philosophy of make the games good, worry about how they look later type thing. But I can't think of a single game that's out now that I'm going to be nostalgic for in 20 years. But I can tell you at least 100 games off the top of my head that I am nostalgic for right now from like 1978. It's kind of
I might
wild
have
actually.
one. I might have one that's actually a console game that's been out in the last couple years that I might have fond memories of later.
Really?
That would be Breath of the Wild.
Oh, I hated Breath of the Wild. I'm the
Oh,
one.
geez.
I'm the guy that hated it. I'm the one.
Donovan just unsubscribed from your
I
podcast.
know. I think I've lost Donovan. It's okay. I like Donovan. I like your projects based on the game, but the game is not for me. It's just I still play the original Legend of Zelda though, if that means anything. But yeah, maybe. I mean, look, a lot of people like Breath of the Wild. I'm not going to take it away from anyone that likes it. It's just not my kind of game. It's a little too much more like an adventure game than a Zelda game. I understand why people like it. It's just not for me. It's
Yeah,
not my kind of
I
game.
think the only thing other than that I've actually been seriously attached to in the last couple of years is mobile, and that's the Mario Kart Tour
It's
on
fun.
mobile.
It's a lot of fun.
And
They did a good job with that.
it's been out for, I think, 2.5 years, and I'm pretty sure I've missed maybe 4 days.
Wow.
And yeah, it's an addiction for me. It's 15 to 40 minutes every damned morning. I just can't get away from it.
I've gotten to the point where I'm playing Pokemon Go every day now.
Hey,
And
you got to catch them all.
I completely blame Diana for this because I hadn't touched the game in oh my god. Okay, so when I turned it on, I started playing it on New Year's Eve. We were at her best friend's house, and I was like, okay, fine, you're playing this. Her best friend plays it. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna fire it up. We're within range of a Pokestop, sitting on the couch, so it's like if I'm gonna build some stuff up, this is a good spot to do it. I turn it on and I look, and the last time I had played, so remember, New Year's Eve, I'm playing this. The last time I'd played before it was August 13th, 2018.
Oh,
I
geez.
didn't even know I had cancer at that point. That's how long ago it was from the last time I played it. And I started playing it, and I didn't know where anything was because they'd moved everything around. So Diana was kind of holding my hand a little bit, showing me where everything was, and I was getting comfortable with it. And the next day, we actually went to a park over here by me, and we played for like 2 hours. We were just catching and spinning, and all of a sudden, like the muscle memory comes back, and I'm winging curveballs out, and I'm like, and I realized just how much fun that freaking game actually was, and it was like, oh yeah, why did you stop playing this again? Like, how did this not get fun for you? Because it's fun now. Like I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. Like I'm sitting there on the couch every once in a while. I'll throw the game up. I'll catch a Pokemon sitting on my couch, or I'll put my character in front of me so I can pet him and get fruit. Like I'm doing all this stuff. Like the old routines are all back, and I'm enjoying it so much. But
I don't know. I missed that craze. It just wasn't my thing.
sure,
That's all right.
everybody has their thing, right? I mean, I'm
Yeah,
I'm I'm totally not in the Minecraft or Roblox thing either, but that's definitely a big thing for kids too.
right.
I
Definitely.
like I've gotten to the point where I really like making stuff from these things. Like I've enjoyed like I was very proud of myself a couple of days ago. I wanted to do an experiment with making wooden beads on the Glowforge. And I've actually been kind of refining that process a little bit. And one of the ways I'm doing it is one of the things I wanted to do is I was like, let me see what it's going to be like to drill into the bead, even though it's only like a 1/8 piece of wood. So I'd have to use like a tiny, tiny bit. But I want to see what I can do. So I made a couple of Pokeballs just to see and I was so proud of myself. I sat there on Adobe Illustrator, and instead of downloading a picture of a Pokeball like an SVG, I actually made a Pokeball, which doesn't sound like a lot, right? Because it's like, oh, it's a circle, a line, and another circle. How hard is it? Make one for the laser. And you realize how many considerations in that design you have. You can't have fills because they won't work. You can't have overlapping stuff because it'll cut through. You can't have just strokes because it's just going to cut a stroke. You have to make sure that everything is expanded correctly and joined correctly. And then if you have to make sure that if you resize it, you're resizing those strokes appropriately. Otherwise, you're going to make a tiny Pokeball that's just a big fat line. And all these things like I'm doing as I'm doing, I'm like, I was so proud of myself for figuring it out. And then I made it and it came out so cool. And I get that buzz because when I look at games that I like and I make something from a game that I like, it's recognizable to me. And that makes me so happy. Like I don't even get it with TV stuff or movie stuff, but there's something about game stuff, making game stuff in real life that just feels so fun. I don't know.
I like to pull from all three of those. I mean, I love my gaming stuff, my TV, and my movie stuff.
Mhm.
I think I like to pull a lot of my inspiration from those three categories because I think they're cool. And apparently, I've discovered that things I think look cool are things that other people agree are cool.
I would agree
Um,
with that.
I've at least come to the conclusion that I don't ever want to be that artist that makes things that he thinks other people will like. It's the reality is you make things that you think are fantastic, and then other people will think they're fantastic if you have good taste. There's an
Hmm.
if in that one. If
You
you
gotta
don't
have the
have
good
good
taste.
taste, then the things you think are cool are maybe not. But I mean, if you've got good taste and you make things that you think are cool, then other people will think that those are cool too.
I think it's kind of a translation of passion, right? When you're making something that you think is cool, you're excited about it, and when you tell someone about it, you're excited to tell them about it. When I did that polycam scan of the pinecone statue, I was so excited about that. Not because it was a pine cone. Who the hell cares? It's a pine cone, right? But it was so cool to be able to see something in the real world, run around it with my LiDAR enabled phone, get a really competent, not perfect, by the way, but very, very competent 3D scan of it, put it into my software, fix it up, then put it into a slicer, turn it into a 3D print it, prime it, and paint it. Like, holy crap, that was such a cool process. Like, and I was so excited about it. And everyone I tell them, like, look at this thing. And of course, the jokes about what it looks like have come from literally everybody. It wasn't just you. And I'm not repeating them here, but go to my Instagram feed and look at the pine cone. It won't take much imagination to figure it out. But in fact, even Diana said that's what it looked like, just so you know. Um, but I was so excited about it. And you can understand why it's exciting when you really break down what we're doing with this stuff, right? Like my
Yeah.
phone did that. My phone. Do you know how long I've been tinkering with photogrammetry and it works like trash? And now it's like, oh yeah, here's the missing piece, LiDAR. Try it now. It's like, whoa. That was
I'm
it.
still trying to figure out how your phone emits or captures LiDAR in any way. I mean, is there a chip in an iPhone for that? Or
On the 12, 13, and 14 Pros, there's a LiDAR sensor on the back and front of the phone.
well, shit, that's cool.
It's very cool. I
That
think
is cool,
y-
and
y-
I'm looking forward to the day when I can go and get a just a handheld 3D scanner for 200 bucks, $300. I mean,
I don't
you
imagine
said
it's that far off.
you said 3D. Uh, what is it? DIY Dave
Mhm.
had like a $1,500 scanner.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Let's take a decimal point off that in like a year or two when the technology gets a little bit more spread around, and I'm gonna want one of those because that's cool.
I think what was wild about seeing Dave's is, yeah, it's $1,500, right? So we'll leave it out there. It's $1,500, but That's technology that 5 years ago was $6,000, right? And it's
Right.
$1,500. And he scanned me at Maker Camp. And I was like, because I remember how these scanners used to be, and it was a slow process. You needed perfect lighting. Everything needed to go perfectly, right? He scanned me under an overhang in a pavilion at Maker Camp in about 120 seconds. He had a full scan. Now, I don't know how long it took him. I know he had to clean up all the models afterwards. I know that everyone that got scanned, it took a while for him to get them all up into the folder where they all are, because he had to go through and clean them up afterwards. And of course, with any 3D scanner, you're going to have to do that. I understand that. But what I'm genuinely amazed at is that in 2 minutes plus some cleanup work, he has a really good scan of me, like a really, really good scan of me for $1,500. Like,
Well, to be fair, a couple years ago, it might have taken 3 or 4 minutes. You're you're half the man you used to be.
fair, fair point, fair point. But I was a lot rounder, so it is an easier shape overall. There's not as many wrinkles, wrinkles. There's not as much form as there was.
Fair enough.
It's kind of wild though. I mean, just everything's advancing so fast. Like the new Shape Oko machines are incredible. The new 3D printers that are out. I mean, you and I are both drooling over an FDM printer. By the way, that's how crazy things have gotten. In 2023, Jeff and I, who have both seen the best 3D printing you can do, which is resin SLA DLP type printing, we're both drooling over an FDM printer, going, I really have to justify not buying this.
Yeah. I don't need to justify it because I think I'm going to here pretty soon. I was looking at finally taking the jump into the plastic pooper end of the world because I've never had a plastic pooper. And
That's amazing to me, by the way. You jumped straight into resin, which no one ever does. That's crazy.
well, I looked at both types of machines and I looked at what I wanted to do with them, and I
Hmm.
wanted to print detailed little Mario characters and tchotchke crap. And the resin really had the better details, and it was missing all those ugly layer lines. So I just decided to go that way with it. I didn't mind the small print space. I mean, you get this teeny tiny little plate you're printing on, so that's kind of a limitation. But I mean, tchotchkes fit on the little tiny plate. It's fine,
You know what the dirty
It
little
doesn't bother
secret?
me.
You know what the dirty little secret is? Even people with giant printers mostly print little things. That's
Yeah,
that's 90%. Look, I'm not gonna say people don't print big things, but what I'm gonna say is no matter how big your printer is, most of the stuff you print is not big.
right,
So that's an overrated thing. Like the Prusa I have is what,
right.
10 by 10, I think. Yeah, I think it's 250 millimeters by 250. So yeah, 10 by 10. I've never
Yeah.
maxed out the bed on it. Never. So
Yeah, well, 3 inch by 4 inch might be a little bit more limiting, but
true.
there's
True.
only been a few times where I've really felt limited. Now, one of the things I was waiting for on the plastic pooper was the ability to do the multiple colors because I've
Hmm.
wanted to be able to do multiple colors. And I thought that maybe I was going to buy your best recommended Prusa and then get one of those aftermarket filament switchers that you run before the Prusa. And it's like
Hmm.
what is it, a mosaic
The
palette or
mosaic palette. Yeah, you get the mosaic palette is
yeah.
probably your best
I was
option
looking
there.
at the Prusa with the palette as a possible option to feed that need. But then these guys from Bamboo come out with that X1,
I
and
know.
I think I might just have to go that way instead.
I
Let's
don't even
not do
blame
any
you.
aftermarket games. Let's just take the one that prints 4 times as fast as the Prusa, has 6 times more brains calibrating itself, monitoring itself, and taking care of itself, and does the filament switching internally and competently, although it does seem to waste quite a bit of filament doing it.
It does waste a lot of filament. That's one thing, and whatever. I mean, it is what it
Yeah,
is. But
well, it
yes,
is what it is.
yeah.
But I mean, part of my problem is that I'm printing things in one color and then I'm handing them to a kid who has honestly very little care for artistic anything. I'm not going to say he's not artistic at all. I'm just going to say he doesn't care. He has zero attention to detail, and he'll just slap some paint on it in a couple spots and say, "This looks good." And I'll be like, "Okay, well, you're happy with it. It's yours. That's all I care about, you know." But damn, you know, it's going to be nice to print something that actually has, you know, 2, 3, 4 colors, and each part comes out the color it's supposed to. So
Yeah.
that's going to be,
Yeah.
you know, world changing to come out with multiple color parts. And you know, the hands are one color and the sleeves are a different color and the pants are color number 3, because you can do that shit.
I've seen so many sample prints of what it can do, and just it was funny because when the X1 first came out, the layer lines and the printer, the slicer wasn't amazing. The layer lines weren't looking great. There was some weird ringing issues. There was some weird booger issues. And over time, with a couple of firmware updates, and this printer hasn't been out all that long. It's only been out a couple of months. And now
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden it's like, oh no, this thing's great now. Like, look at it now. Like, even I love, my favorite to watch has been um oh my god, what's his name? Bald guy, ear hole things. I forgot his name. I'll find his name before we're done talking. But he's had one of these since the very first version of it, and he's been raking them over the coals when they need it and praising them when they need it. And he has gone back many, many, many times and gone, look what they fixed here. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. And it's kind of wild seeing how much this printer's improved just in the short time it's been out. And you can order one right now, by the way. In the end of January, you'll have it. It's on their website, $1,500, 1450. So with the multi material. So
Yep.
I
Yep. That's one of the toys that's on my very soon to purchase shopping list.
don't
I,
blame you.
but you know, and that's the cheap one too, to be fair. The other one's going to cost me more, and I'm probably not going to make any money from it either, but I'm going to have a lot more fun with it.
What's the other
um
one?
oh, well, I'm going to have to get myself a Cyclone.
Oh well, I mean, you know what? That's such a given. I actually forgot about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah, I just heard some great news about that.
hmm
On Corey's story the other day, he said he sold his 5th
He
prototype,
sold the fifth
which
prototype.
made me very happy for Corey, but made me very depressed because I'm not ready to buy one for another few weeks. And but I was only sad for about 30 seconds because his very next story says he decided to make another 5 prototype machines to release right away. So
Nice.
he's got a lot more feedback before he worries about making any major changes to it. So
I
that means I don't
cannot
have to wait
wait.
months for him to get past the prototype phase. It means that, you know, I can maybe be playing with one of these toys next month.
I cannot wait. I literally cannot wait for you to get your hands on one. And you don't, honestly, had I not lost my job, you probably would have had one already because I would have bought it for you just so I could buy another one for me and know how to use it. Because in nobody's hands do I have the faith that it will get torture tested as I have in yours. I am so excited for you to get one because me personally, what I envision is like cranking out like lightsaber hilts and like Harry Potter wands and stuff like that. Like the kind of stuff that you can 3D print. Yes, you can 3D print all these things, but there's something about making a Harry Potter wand out of actual wood or making a lightsaber hilt out of aluminum, even if you just stick it to the machine after you're already done and you've cast it like Corey did. But all this stuff, like there's so many cool things that machine can do. And the more I see, the more he talks about it and the more I kind of think about it now that I understand the way it works, the more my mind is going, oh my God, I really want one of these things. Like I
No,
really, really want one.
I've wanted one since the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my original plan did not include the Shapeoko. Um, I'm one of those guys that does like weeks worth of research into features and understanding what's what and trying to pick out the best model for me. And I'm a super comparison shopper. I spent like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks looking at CNCs, and I was expecting a good chunk of money to come in, and I'd picked out a package that included the CNC Shark with like the 30-inch bed on it, which was, I don't know, it was like 6 or
Six.
7
Yeah, it's like
grand,
$6,000. Yeah, I know
six
exactly what you're
grand
talking
or
about because I
something
was
like
looking at
that.
it. Yep.
And then they want an extra, I don't know, it's probably $1,000 for the rotary add-on to go with it. And I figured by the time I paid for $2,000 Aspire and some tools for it, I should be, clocking in just a little under 10 grand for the whole package. And that
Hmm.
was what I did my research and found and decided I wanted. And then I found out that the money I was getting was going to be coming in monthly installments and not lump sums, and I wasn't going to have any 10 grand. So I start grumbling about I need to go buy a cheap CNC now. I gotta go. I was in no mood to start over my research. I just didn't, and I was already unhappy because I lost the machine I'd put together that I'd wanted to buy. And I wasn't going to be able to get it. And you're like, hey, you should get a Shapeoko 3. They're a great deal. And I went and I looked at the Shapeoko and I said, yeah, that looks fine. And I just bought the damn thing.
Hmm.
I mean, it was crazy because I didn't research any other lower end affordable machines. You said this one's good, and I was just so
Well,
done with the research and not getting what it was I'd picked out that I just, the hell with it, I'm just buying this one. And I haven't
on the
regretted
consumer
it.
level, at the time that we bought these were the best machines you could buy. You can make a case now that the Onefinity is a better machine. That's fine. I'm not going to argue with anyone who says that. There's a valid case to be made that it's a might in some ways it's actually a better machine, right? But I will say that at the time, it was this machine or an X Carve. And anyone dares tell me an X Carve is anywhere near the machine that this is, I will kick them directly in the teeth. You're an idiot. You're wrong. Now,
Well,
doesn't mean that the X Carve's not a good machine. Doesn't mean
it's
it
hard to
doesn't have
tell.
its place.
Nobody's ever gotten one assembled enough to get it to work.
I think, you know what's funny? Of
If
all
you
the
can't
people I
put it
know,
together, it doesn't matter how competent the damn machine is. Now, does
I
it?
agree. I know so many people that have CNCs, and I know so few of them that have X carves. That's not to say, like I said, it's not to say they're bad machines. They are not bad machines, but the Shapeoko is a much better machine. It just is in every conceivable way. It's constructed better. It's more rigid. The support is better. The company is a much better company to deal with. I'm not just kissing butt because I had someone from the company on this podcast. I love my Shapeoko. Um, but yeah, it's funny how that's changed too. Like now there's now Onefinity. Granted, I didn't love that they were basically whoring every freaking influencer got a free one at some point. Every
Right.
major influencer got a free Onefinity, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh, well, yeah, well, I know I've been talking about my X car for the last 4 years because I got that for free, but now I got this for free, and this is better." Or whatever. Screw those
Well,
people.
it was better.
There are
You can't argue
there.
with their logic. Not only was it the new thing that someone gave me for free, so I'm going to praise it, but it
Right.
actually was
It
much
actually
better.
is
I
better.
mean, you move to a machine with ball screws instead of
Sure.
belts, it's an automatic upgrade in,
Well,
the
that was the same with
stability.
and that was the same with the Shapeoko, right? So
Yeah,
the X Carve was this, wiggly, unrigid, weird machine made with aluminum extrusions and plates. And then you get the rails for the Shapeoko and they weigh like 25 pounds each. And it's like, oh, like this is
yeah.
a much beefier machine.
And
Uh,
the new ones have got the whole ball screws and all
yep.
the, yeah, it's hard to say whether the Onefinity's actually got a whole lot of leg up on the Shapeoko 5s
Not
and Pros.
anymore. Probably not
Once
anymore.
once you get up to the 5s and the Pros, they're pretty equivalent machines,
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think.
They're all pushing each other. You notice that
Right,
Inventables, Carbide, and Onefinity are all pushing each other now, and that's just good for everybody, right? Because right now, if I wanted to upgrade, I have some really good upgrade paths from all three companies. And that's
right.
perfect. Because when I bought this, the only path for a quality CNC was the Shark, which is funny because you were looking at it and I was looking at it. Thank God I didn't go with the shaper. Not that it's a bad machine, but it just would have so been the wrong machine for me. But Yeah, the Shark was the machine I was looking at too. I was looking at the smaller one. I was looking at the one that was it 24 by 30, or it was like 24 by something. It was very narrow and long. I was like, yep,
Right.
that's what I need it for. I'm glad I didn't go with that one too. But and it was like 4,500. Like, ugh.
Right.
It's like who's gonna?
Ouch.
I don't have $4,000, so I spent three.
Exactly.
I spent three. You know what? We have been talking. I can't believe it, but we have been talking. For those of you that don't know, Jeff and I pretty much talk almost all day, almost every day. So the fact that we can talk for an hour this easily is nothing new. But we have been talking for an hour. So why don't we kick over and talk about some things of the week? Because I am genuinely curious to see what you're bringing to the table this time.
All right. Well, I'm going to cheat. I
You're
brought two.
allowed.
I brought two,
The
but
legacy of Ethan is alive and well.
I figured that for my first pick, I was going to stick with the digitally creative theme
Uh-huh.
and suggest the most amazing digital creation video that I've seen in the last month or so. And that would be Frank Howarth. I think you pronounce it Howarth,
And Coworth, yeah.
but making his Christmas orb that came out a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he did an amazing job. He cut out a bunch of inlays, and then he cut out a bunch of pockets and filled the inlays, cleared them off, cut holes in the inlays with the because he hadn't ever taken them off the CNC. So he went back and punched holes into the inlays, and then he filled the holes with segments of colored pencil.
Yep.
And then he cut each one of the inlays out into a pentagram shape. And I don't know,
Uh-huh.
what was it? I don't know, 12-sided thing, or he glued them up he did some weird jig with woodworking magic to do the angles and the bevels, and then glued them together, and then he stuck the whole thing onto the rotary and used the rotary to globe out, round off, everything except for the two ends. And then he takes it off the rotary, turns it 90 degrees, sticks it in a couple of cups, and puts it on the lathe to finish off the other ends. And it's just that he did an inlay on an inlay and woodwork magic, and then a rotary, and then more lathe magic. It was a combination of he put it all together there. It was an
It's
awesome video.
I hadn't even seen this, and you sent me the link to it, and I just saw the thumbnail and just went, "Holy crap!" Like, because I kind of just even from the thumbnail, you kind of understand at least some of what's going on, and just what you understand from the thumbnail is mind blowing. And you watch him actually go through his process to make it, and there were so many points in when he's doing it where I was just like, he has a lot of faith cutting that down to a sphere that there's actually going to be material there. Like me personally, I
Right.
would never trust my math enough to expect there to be colored pencil at that part of the sphere when I was cutting it down. So it
Well,
was impressive.
that was the risk he took,
Yep,
and it paid off.
it's
But
fantastic.
that's a fantastic video.
Hmm.
And then my second pick is the coolest artist that I've seen on Instagram in the last couple of months.
Aw, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, you're fantastic. And the guy I happen to be talking about is the most non-digital creator, which is why I've got him as a pick number 2. His name is Kevin Stone, and his Instagram handle is metal sculptor Kevin Stone with underscores. And he makes these huge, mongus, big metal sculptures. He's got a T-Rex with the head's 5 feet big. Okay,
Oh my
and he's
god.
he's he's working on uh the dragon. Technically, it's a wyvern, if you know the difference from Game of Thrones. Um, and it's maybe 30 feet long and about 12 foot tall, and it belches 15-foot gouts of flame out of its mouth, and it's just incredible. The detail, it's just spectacular. So I
Wow.
know the guy's suffering with 95,000 subscribers on Instagram, but I think, I'm not doing this for the sculptor. I'm doing this for the crowd. You need to watch this guy because it's cool. He doesn't need the followers, but you need to see something this cool going on in your Instagram feed. So that's for the listeners, not for him. He doesn't
In
need the
his
list.
most in his most recent post, he has the T-Rex looking at the wyvern, and the scale of these things is just insane. It's
Yeah.
freaking insane.
Oh yeah,
That's
it's crazy.
wow.
There's a shot somewhere in his feed of the wyvern, and he has an actual adult human female sitting on its neck between the spikes, and she fits like she belongs there. It,
Wild.
wow.
That is some
And
serious scale work. Wow. This is incredible stuff, man.
I mean,
Wow.
he's one of those guys that's got a team that's helping him, but I think we're still going to give him credit for this.
Oh hell yeah! It's the vision. The vision is what makes the difference.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, this
And
is a good one, man. Yeah, metal underscore sculptor underscore Kevin underscore Stone. You guys got to check this out. This guy is insane. Oh, I wish I could. You know what? He's a content creator. I'm gonna have him on this podcast. You watch. I'm gonna get him on
well,
because
send him a message.
yeah, I'm expanding. I'm expanding what this podcast is for. It's for content creators too now because I want it to be because it's my podcast. But
It's your show. You do what you want, man.
exactly. No, this is a really good one. Not that your first recommendation wasn't good, but this is
Yeah.
wild. I'm definitely gonna check out more of his stuff. He has a YouTube channel too, which is kind of cool. So I don't know if he's active on it, but let's see. Is he active on
I
it?
I haven't chased him down to look at YouTube, to be honest.
He's got some stuff here. He's got some stuff here. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm subscribed to him on YouTube too. There we go. Nice. Good call. Yep, he's also metal sculptor Kevin Stone on YouTube for those of you that are looking from there. So cool. My thing of the week is a recommendation from a friend. For those of you that longtime listeners of Because We Make and Digitally Creative know that Steve Casino, otherwise known as the Peanut Guy, has become a friend of mine. And last week on the show, was it last week? Yes, it was last week. I was talking about the problems I've had trying to get the Tamiya fine surface primer because Michaels doesn't have it, Hobby Lobby doesn't have it, Joanne doesn't have it, Blick doesn't have it. Nobody has it. I can't get it anywhere, and it's my favorite primer for small stuff. So I asked him, and I said, "Hey, since you use Tamiya paints, do you use their fine surface primer, and do you have a source for it?" And he said, "I do not. What I use is Liquitex Clear Gesso, which I bought a bottle of on his recommendation." I had never thought to use gesso as a primer for like 3D prints. And I am so glad he mentioned it because it is life changing. It is the best thing I have ever used as a primer. It's super. This one's clear and it's matte. But it goes on super thin, like super thin, so you don't lose detail when you put it on something that's got a lot of detail. And it dries like sandpaper. It almost feels like it has some serious tooth, no shininess to it, plenty of texture to grab paint. Obviously, this is made to work with acrylics, but I'm assuming you could probably use anything with it. Although I don't know why you'd want to use anything but acrylics with gesso, but you do you. I would
Well,
say it'd probably work with enamels too, so you could probably get away with it.
as someone that's not a painter, I have
Mhm.
what's probably a stupid question. If you're using a primer, does it matter if it's matte or gloss? Because you're going to cover it with another paint, which is either going to be shiny or not. Does the primer make any difference? You're not going to
Well,
see it. You're covering it, right?
well, it only makes a difference in that you get more tooth with the less shiny it is. So satin, whether it's satin, gloss, or matte, if it's less shiny, you get more tooth to grab paint. So it really is just a matter
Okay.
of how easily you want it to grab the paint. And one of the things I like about this is that it's so dry, like and so rough when it dries, that you can cover things theoretically. If you could probably cover things with one coat rather than going crazy. And because a lot of times, especially when you use some of the paints I use, which are heavily pigmented, what you end up doing is you kind of drag the paint along, and it doesn't bite onto what you're painting on. And what I found with this stuff is that just doesn't happen. You put this on and it stays where it is, and you don't end up dragging paint when you're painting over it. So the only thing that sucks on the bottle, I bought this is a bottle of it. I got it at Michael's. I think I paid $26 for this bottle, but it goes a long way. This is 16 ounces. It goes a long, long way from what I'm told. The only thing is on the bottle, it says it takes 24 hours to dry. I wouldn't say it takes 24 hours, but I would say it takes a long time to dry. It does not dry quickly, but thin coats, a couple of them, make sure you got the whole thing covered, and I think you're going to be fine with it. So that is my thing of the week because I've used it a couple of times since I got the bottle, and I am extremely, extremely happy with it. You know what else I'm happy with? I am
I bet it's
happy.
the people that support the show.
You are so correct, Jeff. You're very good at this. You're almost like a professional broadcaster.
It's almost like I've listened to your show before.
Like one or two, right?
Yeah.
The people that support this show are Matthew Serio of Artigiano Serio, Big Al Schultz of New York Woodworks, who is in the Bahamas right now, the bastard. Tori Decker of Tori Did It, Ed Swanson of Ed's Clocks and More, Jake Drews of Make with Jake, Megan Chris from Onyx Designs Woodwork, Christian Neary of Warren Works. Little note about Warren Works, Christian Neary. He is doing a project a week on his YouTube channel. So definitely go check him out. He's already knocked off two. He's basically took Jimmy DiResta's suggestion of taking a deck of cards and writing a project on each card, shuffling the cards. Every week he draws a new card and does the project. Very, very cool. So follow him on his YouTube channel. He's a good guy. Jeff Stein, aka A Weird Guy. Look at that. See, I keep telling everybody you just can buy your way onto this podcast. It does work. Kim and Garrett of Kim and Garrett Make It, Rory Langefeld of RLO Woodworks and DIY, Robert J. Keller, Rebecca Cole of Bexy Designs, Brian Arsenault, the Seven Hills Maker, Lars Coleman of Colorado Multicraft, Dave Bauer of Dave Bauer Art, Nick Birchtold of Birchtold Design Build, new to the list. You guys may know him as the Boob Guy. And for those of you that know, you know. But yeah, Birchtold Design Build, go check him out. Jeremy Speece, Mike of Pixels to Prototypes, Donald LeBlanc of Fun with Woodworking, Grant Alexander of the Clamp Podcast, and also new to the list, Brad Harrison of Brad's Customs. So go check him out also on Instagram. I think it's Brad's Customs or Brad's_Customs, but just look up Brad's Customs. You'll see Brad Harrison. Go follow him too. I appreciate everyone that supports the show financially. It makes this show happen. If you can't support the show financially, share it. Tell other people about it. Leave a review if you're able. We just got our first new review of Digitally Creative last week, and I would appreciate it if you guys could head over there and maybe do another one. Even if you did one for Because We Make. There's nothing wrong with saying you love me twice, because I am a vacuous hole of affirmation, as my former co-host told me. And she's not wrong.
Nope.
Jeff, it's been a pleasure, brother. It's funny how many times your name has come up since the rebrand of the podcast, because man, if anyone can be called digitally creative, I can't think of anyone that fits that name better than you. I love what you're doing. I love watching whatever wacky thing you're coming up with next. And I love the fact that I always feel like I'm being shamed into doing more by you. So I do appreciate that as well. The occasional kick in the ass of what are you doing in the shop today? Always appreciated, because sometimes it's nothing until you say that. So I do appreciate that as well.
So, we have some time for some technical advice. Things that I wish people would have told me 2.5 years ago going into hobby CNC.
100%. Jeff's words of wisdom to close out the episode. Love it. Let's do it.
If we've got time, I've got plenty of words, and some of them are even wisdomous.
Go for it.
Well, let's see. Zeros are a good one. You have a tendency to do a top zero or a bottom zero on your projects?
Most of the time, I'm only engraving, so it's a top 0.
Okay. Well, I'll support that logic that
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to be doing engraving or pockets or anything that's a top surface only, then zeroing off the top is clearly going to get you the most accurate depth
Mm-hmm.
per pocket. However, if you're going to do any cuts that involve through cuts all the way through the piece down to the spoil board, then for better accuracy, you're much better off zeroing on the bottom off of the spoil board. And that way you don't have to make spoil board art for your shop.
Not
There's
that I've done that. Not at all.
there's now there's a time and a place for spoil board art, because if you've got a big monster machine, like Al's Hannibal, where you're running
Mm-hmm.
a full sheet of 1-inch ply and single pass, then you really, part of the workflow involves chewing up the spoil board. That's the way those machines work best, is to dig a little far and just blast through in one pass. So those you should have spoil board art. But if you've got a 1/2-inch piece of material and your hobby machine is going to take 5 passes to get to the bottom, if you get to the bottom and decide to go another 1/10 of an inch into the spoil board, why did you run 2 passes past 0? I mean, it's just,
Mm.
if you've got a hobby machine and you're making spoil board art for your walls, I'm quietly judging you. I'm just going to let you know that.
I love it.
But if you zero off the bottom, there's no reason you can't be cutting through the material and stopping right when you can see the blue tape, but not cutting it. But that's the precision that you can get from cutting on a bottom 0.
Okay.
And the next one I like, everybody wants to know when they start out about these mysterious speeds and feeds and chip loads. And there's these charts out there, and they're 90-page long charts. And they tell you that if you're going to cut through hardwood and you're going to use a 1/4-inch end mill, then you should be running this many RPMs and this many inches per minute. The catch is that's not sufficient amount of information. There's too many variables to count. I mean, it's a good starting spot, but to be fair, that all depends on if you're using the right depth of cut, per depth per pass, and the amount of step over you're using.
Mm-hmm.
If you're taking a full width step over, you can't run it as fast as just a grazing the edge kind of step over. So the chart kind of loses you as soon as you step off the standardized path for what you're doing. Then the chart's kind of out the window. So
Okay.
I'm not sure. I've read about them, but I'm going to tell you, I have not in 2.5 years ever calculated a chip load, and I have no intentions of starting now. And I could care less about a chip load. I really could. And
I
I
don't
don't
even have
care.
one of those charts.
I don't care. I barely care about RPMs and inches per minute. And even in the most vague way, do I care
Mhm.
about those? Because it turns out that the controller software allows you to adjust your feeds on the fly, plus or minus 10% while it's running. So I'll start, if I'm running a 1/4-inch bit, I'll just throw, say, 100-inch per minute into the toolpath as just a starting point. And then RPMs, I don't know. I just, leave it on whatever the hell 3.5 is on the top of the router. And that's just a starting point. And I'll start the job. And before I hit start, I'll crank the down 10% button. I'll down it to about 60%, which will start
Mhm.
me out at maybe, 60 inches per minute. And then I'll let it jump in, and I'll see how deep and how wide and how well it's chewing its way through it. And it seems like it's having an easy time of it. Then you start bumping it up 10% and bumping it up another 10% until it really starts to get some work done. and you bump it up another 10%, and you start to hear it struggle and chatter a little bit. And at that point, you either back it back off 10% or turn the router up a half a notch to 4.
Mm-hmm.
It's really simple. You play it by ear. It doesn't matter what the specs are for the bit. It doesn't matter what type of router bit you're using. It doesn't matter what kind of material you're cutting, what your step over is, what your step down is. You start the thing really conservative and you speed it up one notch at a time until it feels like it's doing the right amount of work, and then you watch it go.
I think
I don't
it's
care what the
important.
numbers are.
Yeah,
They're
I
useless.
think a lot of those numbers. I think a lot of those numbers are good for metal, right? It does matter more with metal. With wood,
Speeds and feeds are for engineers and machinists.
yes,
And
yes,
guys like Al with a machine, if you want to do a full depth cut through 1 inch of acrylic in a single pass, you have to have the machinist mentality for that.
right.
But as a
Because you need
hobby
to know,
machine,
right.
with the 1 horsepower trim router and
You're
quarter
right.
inch belts driving this thing, I'm not demanding that wood get blasted out of the way. I'm asking it politely to please move. And I'm going to take several shallow passes, and I'm just going to push it as hard as the machine is going to be happy with, which is
Good.
why I don't break bits. If you started at 60% and work your way up, then that initial moment of oops, I accidentally forgot and went through a half inch in one path, you have a lot more time to react at 60%, and you can
True.
either slow that sucker down to 20% or catch the pause button before you've really broken anything.
Good deal.
Now, and I was going to throw in something about end mills, because everybody wants to know what kind of end mills you're supposed to buy. And I've got some solid opinions on these, because if you've got a straight end mill, they've got a spiral flute going up them. Now, depending on which way the flute goes, some of them, as the bit turns, the blade spirals upward, and they call those an upcut bit.
Hmm.
And those are good for if you're digging a path, it'll clear the wood chips up and out of the path a little bit better. But one of the negatives to that is that it will also pull the material on the top of the path up and out, and it'll fray the top edges, especially if you get the blowout, especially if you've got plywood.
Hmm.
And the downcut is the opposite, where the spiral funnels the wood down as the blade cuts. And it works as well because there's enough action going on. It'll blow the chips out of the trench for the most part anyway. But it doesn't give you the top blowout on the top of the part like the upcuts do. And in theory, it's better to use an upcut bit when you're cutting through the bottom edge of a piece of plywood so it doesn't blow out the bottom of the plywood. But if your plywood is pressed firmly into the spoil board, it's got less place to blow out to, so it's not as significant as an issue for me so much. Now, the other thing I've got with upcut bits, I've had some serious problem with upcut bits that make me question ever using the darned things at all for anything.
Hmm.
There's this guy that got hit in the head with an apple a few hundred years ago, and he made some laws of physics. And one of those, I believe it's the third one, says for
Hmm.
every force in nature, there's an equal but opposite force pulling the other way.
Hmm.
Now, you've got a bit that is pulling chips upward at a very, steady pace. And therefore, when that bit is grabbing into that wood, the wood is essentially trying to grab onto that blade, and it's trying to pull, as the blade pulls the wood up, the wood is grabbing on and trying to pull the bit down. So if you have an upcut bit and you go too deep, too fast into a groove, the wood will actually grab the bit and yank that son of a gun right down out of the collet, no matter how tight you've got it going. And you'll be doing a 0.1 depth of cut, and then 2 inches later you'll be doing 0.15, and 2 inches later you'll be doing 0.2, and the next thing you know, it just yanks that son of a gun right out of the collet and leaves it hanging in the trench. And I've had it happen with the upcut bit in a handheld router, let alone on the CNC. And I just, the downcut bit is pushing down on the material, which pushes the bit up into the collet if it were to move, which is a much happier solution as far as problems are concerned for me. I'd rather the bit move away from the material than to progressively bite deeper and deeper into it as you go down the path. So I'm to the point where I won't use an upcut bit unless I don't have an option. I just,
don't blame.
I've had it with them. I've had a few problems with them, and I just won't buy them anymore.
The logic is sound.
Now, and I mentioned this to you the other night, is that I will
about
also not
bits.
buy a compression bit.
Yeah, so why can't we use compression bits?
Compression bits are intended for guys with full machines that have, a 45 mercury outboard spindle and run on 720 volts with vacuum tables and hold 4 full sheets of plywood that need to go through. Basically, if you don't have the power to go through a full depth pass on the wood, it's a complete useless waste of time. As a hobby machine, I don't do full depth pass on anything. If I've got a 1/2 inch of plywood, I'm taking it 0.1 and I'm running 5 depth passes to get through that material. The compression bit has a down cut flute for the top 99% of the cutting space. So, and then at the very bottom tip of the bit, the last 1/4 inch or so, it flips direction and does an upcut. Now, the entire point of doing this is that you set your depth so that the depth cuts just a hair into the spoil board intentionally. And the bottom bit, the upcut part at the very tip, is contacting the bottom edge of your work, most likely plywood at this point. And that upcut at the very bottom prevents the bottom tear out by upcutting the bottom edge of the plywood, while the rest of the flutes are downcutting the top edge and middle of the board. These are intended for full depth, single pass runs. And if you're going to inch your way through it 0.1 at a time, you're never going to contact anything except for the 1/4 inch of upcut at the very tip of the bit. And it's a complete waste of $50, $60, $80 for something
more
you're
expensive.
never going to use any of that bit unless you're going to do a full depth pass. And they're expensive and they're completely pointless unless you can blast through a full sheet in one pass. And that's not something I'm ever capable of doing with this machine. I'd break a belt in a heartbeat if I tried that. Either that or I'd have to burn out the router at maximum speed and run it at 8 inches per minute. At which point I'm not saving any time from doing faster, thinner passes,
Good to know. That's good information.
That's my thought on why you should never buy a compression bit unless you've got a seriously powerful machine. The hobbies they don't have any point to them. Save your money.
Cool. That should be, that last 15 minutes should be its own video at this point. That's that's actually some useful information there for people getting into it or wondering what they should spend their money on or where they should spend their money.
Right. It's where you should spend your time on the learning curve and where you should spend your money on tooling and what's going to be the most problematic or least problematic for getting started. you know?
Good
And
stuff.
you could spend a week trying to figure out what the hell a chip load is and how you get the right chip load when you can just feel for it. If it feels like it's struggling, you either need to speed up the router or slow down the damned feed. It's really pretty much common sense. And if it's not working, speed up the feeds or slow down the router. It's
You can always try something else.
it's driving with the steering wheel. You don't need to set it at 0 and then at 90 degrees. You can curve a little one way or the other if it feels like you're a little bit off center, You don't bump yourself back into the lane by yanking it to the one side. You just ease it back a little.
Yep. Yep.
So, hell with the numbers. Just feel for it, man.
I think that is, by the way, I think that's good advice in general. To hell with numbers. A lot of people get obsessed over the numbers. It's like the people that spend 20 years figuring out the perfect organization system, but they never actually put any information in their organization system. They just spend a lot of time on the system. It's just make the stuff. Make the stuff. It's okay. The worst case, you're not going to damage these machines. Truth is, they're robust enough to survive your mistakes, unless you really just aren't paying attention, in which case you probably shouldn't be using the machine anyway.
Well, I've had to replace some stretched belts, so I'll give it that.
Stretched belts, I mean, that's to be expected. That's going to happen. Mistakes are one thing, but catastrophic mistakes, if you're making catastrophic mistakes, you're just not paying enough attention. I mean,
Yeah. Or you're using an upcut bit that get yanked out of the collet. Take your pick.
one or the other.
That may not be your mistake. That just might be physics fighting you.
Damn Newton.
Damn Newton and his apple.
If people wanted to find you, see what you're up to, and learn more about you, where can one find more about Jeff Stein?
Well, one can find me many places named A Weird Guy. I've got a YouTube channel for A Weird Guy, and I've got an Instagram for A Weird Guy. Let's see, I've got a Reddit under A Weird Jeff, and I've got a website under aweirdguy.com where you can find several products that are collecting dust because nobody ever buys anything. But I'm actually hitting the point where I'm okay with that. I don't really want to be a production salesman. I just want to make stuff and find homes for it. If I have to give it away, I don't even care. I mean, I had a whole pile of stuff here that I'd made in the last year, and I gave away like 2/3 of it around Christmas in one direction or
Perfect.
the other, just because what good's it doing sitting here on my website and in my basement when it could be in somebody's house being appreciated? I don't care if I made any money for it. I certainly wasn't making any money for it when it was sitting in my basement in a box. Now, was it? So
Excellent.
I don't feel that I've lost anything by just giving my stuff away.
You know what? You've lost nothing, and somebody else is going to be really happy, and that's a gain also. So
That is a gain.
awesome. Jeff, thank you so much for popping by. I really appreciate it. Definitely go check out Jeff. Jeff has been a longtime supporter of the podcast, of both podcasts. Well, technically it's one podcast, but Jeff's been a longtime supporter. Since there's been support to be had, Jeff's been there, and that's very much appreciated. So go check him out, see what he's up to. You'll even learn how to sharpen a pencil with a CNC, just like
Oh, geez.
135,000 other people have learned over the last couple of days, which is pretty
That's
insane.
that's crazy. If I've got any Instagram advice for people, do something that looks really cool, except then kind of screw it up so it's not quite right. Because if you do it perfect, people are going to go, "Oh, that's awesome," and then they're going to move on. But God forbid if you do something that's really cool and then just doesn't turn out the way you hoped, you're going to get the interaction. If you screw something up in the shop, people want to watch something getting broken. And I tell you, people get all hyped about watching your CNC carve this absolutely perfect looking pencil, and then gets up to the top and it's still got kind of a rounded tip on it. Because if I'd have bumped the Z down another 5 thou, it probably would have polished the tip on that pencil up to a point. But because it came up with a rounded tip, I've got tons and tons of comments between Instagram and Reddit of people just outraged with how I could use such a precision tool to come up with an absolute blunt tip on my pencil. And Instagram is rewarding interactivity and entertainment much more than quality these days. And this apparently nailed it, because it looks like it's going to be beautiful, and then it comes out with this blunt tipped pencil tip, and it's just enough to drive people crazy.
Nothing
And
creates engagement like digital blue balls.
I could have reshot this and done an absolute perfect pencil tip, but I would not have gotten 130,000 views on it in a few weeks if I had. It's that potential fail that really pushes reels to travel.
There you have it. That's the best advice you can give. Screw something up intentionally just for the hell of it, because everyone wants to watch.
Yeah. And if
All right,
you want
everybody.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate coming and hanging out. It's been great, and it's been a lot of fun.
Absolute hoot. And go check Jeff out. Go check out his sharpening of a pencil, because, as I just said, nothing creates engagement like digital blue balls. Until next week, everybody, have a great week, and I'll talk to you then.